the next day so we can just pound the podcast juice here. All right. Pat, now it is time for one of my favorite segments that we're going to bring back to the podcast that we like to call Just the Tip. That's right. Just the tip. God, that feels good to say.
That graphic, my goodness.
This is where we just, we want to spend some time. We know that we get new listeners. We know that we get new viewers. And we want to spend a little bit of time just hitting some basics. We're going to spend the next few weeks here, just each of us kind of hitting on one thing that we think you need to keep in mind that'll help improve your outcomes if you're betting or playing DraftKings or DFS on the PGA Tour and golf. Okay, so some of this stuff is going to apply to both. Some of it's going to apply more to, betting than it may DFS or vice versa. So that's it. Tonight, I'm kind of starting it off, and I'm going to go pretty basic, man, with terminology. Okay. I know a lot of people listen to the show, and they may turn on for the first time and be like, what the hell are these guys talking about? What is a GPP? What is chalk? What is pivot? What is all this stuff? And so I just want to run through real quick a few terms that you need to know to be able to understand and follow along with the Tour Junkies podcast and those like it. Pat, feel free to chime in if you like. I will tell you one thing. There's a secret page on our website that a lot of people don't know about, and that is the jargon, the Junkies jargon page. It is tourjunkies.com/jargon, and you can just go to that page. It's free, and it'll just give you some definitions and some terms, right? And I'm going to kind of steal from some of that. It's not a comprehensive list, but it's a pretty decent list. It'll get you started. So if you want to listen to that, if you want to check that out before you listen to a show and kind of get your grasp, then you can. The first one I'm going to start with is GPP. This is a DFS. This is a DFS term. It stands for Guaranteed Prize Pool. And it's a contest that'll pay out a specific prize, even if it doesn't get the targeted number of entries into that contest. And it generally contains larger prize pools that pay out to about the top 20 to 24% of the field. When we talk about a GPP play, we mean like that tournament play where there's going to be a larger tournament, more entries, and even though the top 20 to 24% is going to be paid out, the goal is to finish in the top 1 to 3% or better. Okay, that's the goal because it's a pretty top-heavy payout usually, and 80% or so of the entries are not going to win a thing. They're going to lose all their money. That's a GPP, as opposed to a cash game in DFS, which is your head-to-head matchups or heads-up matchups, your 50-50 contests, and your double-up contest. You can get more details on those at tourjunkies.com/jargon. But those are all three of those contests, obviously a head-to-head. Either one of you is going to win, one of you is going to lose. But in the 50-50 and double-up, around 40 to 50% of all the entries are going to double up their money. So if you're playing $25, you're going to get 50. So it's a greater percentage of lineups and entries are going to win their money back or double their money, and then the rest of them are not going to hit anything. So that's one to know: cash game and GPPs. Another term we talk about a lot: exposure, and that's the money invested in any given player. So if your exposure is high, then you have a player, you have that player in a lot of entries. So if you got Lucas Glover, you've got a lot of exposure to Lucas Glover. That means maybe Lucas Glover's projected to be around 10% owned, and you've got him in like 30% of your lineups. You have high exposure to Lucas Glover. Something to think about. Fade is something we talk about every single week. We're going to fade this player. That means we're just going to avoid him. We're not going to play him, or we're at least going to play a lot less than maybe the majority of people are going to play. So no on the fade. If we say a player has a pretty low floor or a high floor, that means a golfer's downside or the minimum number of points or finish position that you think that golfer is going to play. So if you think their floor is a miscut, that's one thing. If you think their floor is a top 50, that's another thing. Something to think about, as opposed to a ceiling. Ceiling obviously meaning their upside or the maximum number of points or finish position they could have. I think this week, for what we're talking about, Harold Varner has a ceiling of like a win, as opposed to other weeks, maybe in a stronger field. Harold Varner ceiling maybe a top 10 or top 20. So ceiling is one thing. Chalk is something we mention all the time. That's a betting term, an age-old betting term. And for DFS purposes, we use it a lot. It just means that guy's going to be high owned, or maybe the obvious DFS play, or maybe in the betting market, a lot of people like that player. He's a popular player, so a lot of people are going to bet him. It's going to drive his number down. He's going to be too short. But we usually talk about chalk in DFS. If they're chalk, that means they're highly owned or the obvious play that a lot of people are going to be on. Doesn't mean you always avoid them or fade them. It just means you need to know that guy's chalk. Ownership leverage. I say that all the time. That means having, a low-owned golfer or having somebody like that in a big GPP tournament that gives you leverage on other entries. In the event that golfer plays well, you've got leverage, right? If you got a 5% owned guy that finishes top 10 or wins or something like that, you've got a ton of ownership leverage. Very important to have in order to win a GPP. A pivot play is somebody who's like priced in the betting market or in the DFS market, more specifically, near a popular play or a chalky play that people are kind of ignoring. And you can play them and you gain an edge in ownership, especially in those larger GPP tournaments. So a pivot play is like, hey, if the popular player is right here, priced right here, and right above or right above or right below, this player is a good pivot. Play them.
Pivot.
Okay, player pool. That's the number of golfers that you're going to roster or have exposure to for your DFS lineups or your bets. That's like, how many guys am I going to have money on? Total number of guys that I'm putting in any DFS lineup, or I'm betting at all in any capacity in outrights or top 20s or head-to-heads, whatever. That's the number of players in my player pool. And you can obviously talk about how tight or how loose that should be. All right, couple more here. I'm trying to run through these quickly. Balanced lineup. That's when you're playing DFS and you take a lot of players kind of in that mid-tier price point. So you're not playing the top guys, or you're not betting the top guys, but you're kind of looking in that middle section. That'd be like a balanced approach, as opposed to what we call a studs and duds, or like a stars and scrubs lineup, where you have like a couple of the top guys, your DJs, your Jordan Spieths, your JTs, and then you've got like, you pairing them with these duds, these no-name guys you just hope pop. That's kind of what that is. And those are some different approaches. I want to talk about units. I want to talk about your unit, because all units matter. You know what I mean? And so a unit, especially in betting, is it's a betting term to speak to, your basic dollar amount, your standard dollar bet. So let's say you want to spend $50 a week. Your unit is $10. That's like your one unit, right? So you may spend a half a unit betting on Harold Varner at 100 to 1. I'm going to keep with the Harold Varner train. 100 to 1, right? So if we say, yeah, I might put on a half a unit or a quarter unit on this player, like that's kind of like that helps us all bring because what I bet may be different than what you bet. My unit may be larger than your unit. Chances are it is. You know what I mean? Especially Pat. So if I have a larger unit, but I want to convey to you that I'm going to spend a bigger portion of that unit on a guy because I'm confident, that's how I can do that without saying dollar amounts and confusing you. Because $50 to me may mean something different than $50 to you. So there you go. A few betting terms that I think are important to know. Basics, if you're getting started, DFS terms, basic stuff that you need to know if you're going to listen to the show and not be confused. Pat, anything to add there real quick?
I do not. That was great stuff. I mean, you were inaccurate in some ways, but for the most part, you were pretty on point.
Okay. Thank you for that. I appreciate it.